It's an honor to be here. I love Summit. It blessed my son when he was at ACU and graduated 6 years ago. And every time I've come, not only I've been blessed by the students, I've been blessed by the teachers. You just heard an amazing lesson. In fact, basically this morning, what I'm going to do in my 2 sessions is just reaffirm what you just heard from Elise. Because I will tell you as a pastor, the single greatest key to discipleship is a phrase in the Bible: renew your mind. Here's what I've learned. People behave like they behave because they believe what they believe. You can write that down, and if that's the only thing you remember from what I said, it'll be worth it. People behave like they behave because they believe what they believe. You can tell somebody, stop drinking, but until you change his thinking, he ain't stopping drinking. Because it's not the behavior that's driving the thinking, it's the thinking that's driving the behavior. You can tell him, stop looking at porn, but it's bigger than a behavior problem. And so, you think about the beginning. How did Satan start to corrupt everything? He sowed a lie. What did Jesus say? He is a liar and the father of lies. And I don't think you could have anything in your future that will bless you more than what you just heard. Stop and ask the question, is what I'm thinking right now true? Because just because the voice is in your head doesn't mean it's your voice. There's other voices out there. So, I just want to affirm what you just said. In fact, here's what I'm going to do. In my second session, I'm going to talk a little bit about what she talked about being centered. I'm going to use a different word, but it's basically the same idea. But what I want to do in this session is I want to share with you what I think is the single greatest lie you must learn to rethink if you want to have a flourishing life and if you want to be a leader. Now, you might think, well, you're a pastor. What do you know about being a leader? That's right. I've never started a business. I've never led a department of a college. But think about this. What is leadership? In the end of the day, leadership is influence. Leadership is simply influence. And in some ways, all of us, if we follow Jesus, are called to be leaders because we're called to be influencers. We don't have to have status or position. That's authoritative influence. But then there's the influence of character and the influence of life, okay? You're going to be an influencer. If you're going to have kids someday, I promise you, you're going to be a leader. Whether you are intentionally or not, you're going to have influence, and so you need to steward it well. In some ways, I think I have to learn how to be a leader much more than that dean of a college or that owner of a business, because all of my followers are volunteers. See, I can't say to anybody, jump down and give me 50. I can't say to anybody, turn that paper in or you get an F. I can't say to anybody, you better raise that sales quota by this much percent or you don't have a job. Anybody who does anything for my mission does it because they choose to, not because I can make them. And so what do I have to do? And here's what I think leadership, I love that question. What is leadership? Well, I know there's a lot of good definitions, but for me, basically leadership is this. Leadership is the art of painting such a compelling vision of the future that people are willing to sacrifice to go and pursue it. Think about Jesus. He said, come with me, I will teach you how to be fishers of men. He painted a picture of a future that was so compelling to them, they left where they were to go to a new place. And that's what leaders do. I take you from where you are to where you could be because you want what could be more than you want to just stay where you are. That's leadership. And so, I think God has taught me a lot about being a leader and about painting a vision for people that is worth sacrificing for. Now, I want to share with you in this first session the most important thing I've learned about leadership and the most important lie I've learned to reject, okay? So something about me, my favorite hobby is golf. I'm not particularly good, but I like being outside. I like the fellowship with friends. And I had a real thrill a few years back. I live in Fort Worth, And there's a famous country club there that has a famous golf tournament called the Colonial. It's on the PGA Tour, if you know what that is. And so all the best golfers in the world come to our city 1 week a year, and they play in this professional golf tournament for millions of dollars. There actually was an ACU grad named Lance Barrow, who for many years was the director of sports, golf and football for CBS Sports. Big producer. If you watched it on TV, he was behind this calling the shot. And so they're having what they call the Pro-Am. That's the day before the tournament starts, when the pros have to play golf with spares like me, okay? And you pay a lot of money for the privilege of getting to play with a pro. Well, I've never done it because I'm not paying thousands of dollars just to play golf with anybody. But Lance used his connections and pulled some strings, and he got me a position. So I am going to get to play in a Pro-Am with a pro golfer with hundreds and thousands of people watching me golf. I was immediately petrified for this reason. I'm a terrible bunker player. That's when the ball goes in something called a sand trap. I've played for years. I should be good by now. It is totally mental. Like Lee said, I have all these memories of all the times I have failed, and they come back every time I get into a bunker. And so I just thought, oh God, I'm going to be in front of all these people. Lord, please don't let me hit it in a bunker, okay? And God answered my prayer for 6 holes. On the 7th hole, I hit it into the trees on the left of the fairway. I actually hit a really good shot through the trees all the way down to the green, but it rolled into a bunker. Deep bunker. I mean, when I got down in this bunker, all I could see was the top of the flagstick. And there's hundreds of people around about to watch me do the thing I do worse than anything in golf. So I thought to myself, it's going to go bad. I'm just going to swing. It's probably not even going to get out. And then I'm going to pick up my ball and walk in shame to the next hole. I swung. The ball took off. I heard a clank. Hundreds of people jumped up. I hit the ball into the hole on the fly. I have never done this in my life, okay? Hundreds of people are cheering me. The pro is jumping up and down at what I've just done. So what did I do? Did I shrug my shoulders and grin sheepishly and say, that was so lucky? Oh, no, are you kidding me? I strutted up to that green. Like, well, look, of course it went in the hole. That's where I was aiming, you know. Because everybody was clapping. And applause is so captivating. And then before you know it, applause takes you captive. And when you live for the acceptance of the crowd, you find yourself in a very, very crowded prison. So some years ago, I did an Easter message on the raising of Lazarus. Maybe you remember that story in John chapter 11. If you remember that story, Jesus said 3 things, and all 3 of those statements are powerful. First thing he said was, roll the stone away. Well, that's a word of hope. He's about to do something. Lazarus, come out. That's a word of life. A dead man came back to life. But the third thing he said was something we tend to dismiss. It's just as important. Take the grave clothes off of him. Lazarus is alive. He's come back from the dead, but he can't enjoy it because he's wrapped up in dead clothes. And I asked this question to my church. How many of you are saved? You've got a relationship with Jesus, but you're still stuck in the same stuff you were doing before you got saved, and you can't seem to get free of it. You got salvation, but you don't have freedom. And so I asked my church to do something. I said, I got to give you a card. I said, I want you to write down for me the area of your life where you feel like you're in the most bondage. Okay, I got thousands of cards. And I read all of them because I said, I want to know what my people feel like they're in bondage so I can talk about it. And there were 5 areas that stood out more than any other. Number 5 was anger and bitterness. And I got lots of cards from people who were so wounded by what someone did to them in the past that they found no freedom in the present. Maybe that's some of you. Maybe you were still walking in the pain of something that happened and you're not walking in the freedom of Jesus. Number 4 was financial bondage. Now, a lot of it was debt and the big lie out there that why shouldn't I have right now what I can't afford? But a lot of it was when I feel bad, I buy something. I shop to fill the hole. Bondage. Number 3 was sexual bondage. Some of it was addiction to sexual behavior. Most of it was men. Most of it was porn. We have an absolute epidemic of porn addiction in the church. And it is not only literally rewiring the brains of men, but it is coming back 5 and 10 and 20 years to absolutely destroy families. And it's bondage. I know I'm talking to some guys right now. Number 2, I thought would be number 1, fear and worry. So many people said, I am so afraid of what might happen in the future. I have no joy in the present. But number 1 caught me off guard. The number 1 area of bondage, I got more cards on this than they weren't all written the exact same way, but they all basically were saying the same thing, was, I am so tired of being a people pleaser. I am so tired of living my life letting other people decide if I can feel good about myself. I'm so tired of trying to keep everybody happy. I am so tired hoping somebody will applaud me today. The Bible talks a lot about fear. And there's a phrase in the Bible that shows up a lot. It's called the fear of man. And when you read that phrase, it's not talking about being afraid that someone's going to beat you up. It's talking about living your life where you constantly compromise who you are to get the approval of somebody else. It says in the book of Proverbs, the fear of man will prove to be a snare. Another version says, fearing people is a dangerous trap. Another version says, don't fall into the trap of being a coward. Here's the thing. You cannot live free if you are letting other people constantly tell you who you can be. People pleasing is bondage. But who hasn't felt the weight of that chain? Here's what I've come to learn. Everybody struggles with approval addiction. We all have this overwhelming desire to be accepted by other people. Or to put it another way, we really like to be liked. That's why it is so addictive when we post. We feel good about ourselves if we get a lot of likes, and we feel bad about ourselves if we don't. And the desire to be liked will often overwhelm the desire to be right. Did you hear what I just said? We would rather be liked than be right. There was a well-published study some years ago at a university where they took students from about first grade up to 12th grade in high school. And they put them in a room, 10 at a time. And it sounded simple. The teacher would draw 3 lines on a wall. One was very long, one was medium length, and one was very short. And it was simple. Hold up your hand when I point to the longest line. Like, how easy is that? See, here's what the 10th student didn't know. It was a trick. 9 students had been told, hold up your hand when the teacher points to the second longest line. See, what they were testing was the power of peer pressure. A 10th student didn't know. So they would do the test, and the teacher would point to what was clearly the longest line. And every time that student would hold up their hand and then look around the room and realize nobody else has handed up. 75% of the time, the student would pull the hand back down. From first grade up to 12th grade, they would rather be clearly wrong if that's what it took to fit in with everyone else. Approval addiction. It comes at a high price. It causes us to conform our values. It makes it hard to risk intimacy. Am I going to tell you who I really am if I don't think you're going to like me? It causes me to lose my self-esteem. It's hard for me to feel good about myself when I know I'm faking it most of the time. And maybe most of all, it absolutely erodes our willpower to stand with the few when the view of the many is most popular. As a pastor, I will tell you, so many of our "what was I thinking" choices were driven by the desire to influence what other people think of us. That guy's a workaholic. It's costing him his marriage. It's costing him his relationship with his kids. And you tell him, go home and be with your family. But what's driving it? Remember, you behave like you behave because you think what you think, and he is desperate to have his coworkers think he's a success. I can't tell you how many times I have talked with a young woman who woke up that morning in the bed of some dude she doesn't even like, and she hates herself. And you ask her why. Because the night before, to feel, even if she knows it's a lie, to feel like somebody wanted her was more important than any value. Now, understand, I'm talking to myself because I am a recovering people pleaser. Okay? By the way, most ministers are. Most of us that are pastors, we got into ministry because we like people. And because the shadow side, we like to be liked by people. And most of my life, I've struggled with approval addiction. One of the earliest memories I have of this was I was in, I think it was second or third grade. And here's the rep about me. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying it's, you know, we give kids labels. My rep was I was the smart kid. I was the kid that made the best grades. There was a girl in our class named Connie. We called her the dumb kid. I hate it, but we did. It was a long time ago. Connie was socially awkward. She wasn't the most attractive girl in class, and she struggled in class. I'll bet you anything Connie had learning disabilities, but we just didn't know much about that back then. We just called her the dumb girl. Well, every day in class, our teacher, it was homeroom, we just stayed in one class, did all the subjects, and it was math time. And she would hold up flashcards to learn our multiplication table. I think it was second grade. And she played this game where you would stand up next to someone's desk and they would stand up and she would hold up a flashcard. And if you got the answer right first, you got to go to the next desk. And whoever got to go all the way around the room would get a donut. I usually got the donut. I was the smart kid. Well, this day, I don't know why, the teacher pointed to me and said, Rick, start the game. Pick someone. And all the cool kids whose attention I so desperately wanted, they all gave me the same look. Don't pick me. Well, who am I going to pick that won't cost me anything? And I knew immediately, Connie. So I did. I said, I'll pick Connie. And the whole class laughed because they knew she had no chance, and she didn't. She stood up. The teacher held up the card. I had the answer before she could read it. And the class laughed again. And Connie sat down. And I still see this. It was, my goodness, it was almost 60 years ago. She looked up at me, and her eyes didn't say, I hate you. They said, why did you hurt me? I thought you were one of the nice boys. And in that moment, I just remember feeling so disgusted with myself. My sick desire to be liked was turning me into somebody I didn't like. Here's what I've learned. Most of us, we struggle with being wimpy more than we struggle with being wicked. We don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to do the evil thing. But we'll do the wrong thing if it's what it takes to get likes from the right people. And when courage is absent, bondage is always present. Here's what I've learned. Nobody wins the people-pleasing race. You're never going to find happiness trying to keep everybody else happy. If you've entered the people-pleasing race, here's what you're doing. You're running circles inside a prison. And you can't escape because this race has no finish line. And here's the thing I've learned. Here's what the crowd out there applauds. They applaud performance and they applaud appearance. How good looking are you and what have you won lately? What magazine cover could you be on and how much are you worth? What they will applaud is performance and appearance. And I don't care how hard you run. Somebody is behind you that's going to pass you someday. And they're going to take you off the cover and put them on. J.R. Vassar's a pastor, and he talks about being on a mission trip in Asia, and he went to visit this temple that had this famous big giant Buddha. And he saw these desperately poor people coming and bringing the very last of their money and putting it in front of this statue, hoping for a blessing. And then you walk around the back and there's scaffolding because the Buddha's falling down and they're having to repair it. And he thought, just how tragic. Broken people coming to a broken Buddha, asking the broken Buddha to fix their broken lives while somebody else is fixing the broken Buddha. Then he thought, but how different are we? Throwing ourselves at the same broken system so we can feel good about ourselves. It's bondage. And it leads to significant spiritual damage. And here's why. Think about the Bible. Think about the heroes. How many times did they have to go against the crowd to do what God wanted? In fact, there's even a verse in the Bible in Galatians that says, obviously, I'm not trying to win the approval of people, but of God. If pleasing people were my goal, I would not be Christ's servant. Let that sink in. If pleasing people is your goal, you're going to have a hard time being Christ's servant. Free people live for an audience of one because He's the only one whose measure of your value is going to bring true freedom. So, I told you I was going to teach you the most important leadership principle I've learned and the biggest lie I've learned to reject. Here it is. You ready? I have learned I must live my life from my blessing and not for a blessing. That's the most important thing I could teach you. To learn to live your life from a blessing and not for a blessing. Somebody has already proved how much you are worth. And you are going to live in bondage the rest of your life if you live your life for a blessing. Think about it. Go back to the garden. God made a man. You can read it for yourself. He blessed the man. Then He gave him something to do. And ever since the fall, we've turned that around. Ever since the fall, we've turned it around. Oh, now I'm going to do something. Would somebody give me a blessing? Will somebody clap for me? Will somebody tell me I'm pretty enough or good enough? What if your worth was confirmed and conferred on you before your performance or your appearance was even considered? The scripture says in Ephesians, long before God laid down the earth's foundations, He thought of you and He had His mind settled on you as the focus of His love. You are going to live in bondage as long as what other people think of you is more important than what God has said about you. But other people aren't the experts on your worth. Only God is. And so I meant to bring him. I'm sorry I didn't. I meant to bring a prop. In my office, there is a teddy bear. His name is Tim. He's my teddy bear. He's the world's ugliest teddy bear. I don't know why he's called Tim. I guess when I was a little baby, I called him Tim and it stuck. He's Tim the teddy bear. His nose is bent. His eyes don't work. His fuzz is rubbed off. On the back, you can see stitching where my mom's had to tie him together many times when I was little. He is an ugly bear, but he's my bear. So it's my high school senior year. My parents were going to move. They're having a garage sale. I come home from school one day and I got some tables on the driveway and there's Tim on a table with a Post-it note, 25 cents. I picked up Tim. I went and found my mother. And for the first time in my life, I called her to public repentance. And I made it clear, Tim was never to be sold to anybody at any time for any price. Because Tim's value doesn't depend on what anybody else thinks of Tim. His value comes from who owns him and who loves him and who still does. And so does yours. And God didn't just declare your worth. In Jesus Christ, He proved it. The scripture says He showed His great love for you, but He sent Jesus to die for you when you were still a sinner. In other words, you didn't perform. It wasn't your appearance that impressed God. When you had nothing to impress God with, He loved you and Jesus died for you. So right now, you're determining your worth based on how you see yourself in the eyes of other people or in the eyes of God. You woke up today and either you first went and said, God, thank you for telling me who I am, or you went to Facebook and looked for how many likes you got. But you're doing it. You're finding your worth. Somebody is telling you what you're worth. And when you become convinced that you matter to God, it will not matter what others think. And the love of God will crowd out the need to be applauded by the crowd. And when you know who you are, you also know who you don't have to be. You can leave the prison of other people's expectations, and it is so liberating to be so conscious of God's approval that nobody can tell me how to live or who to love. Because that's why this matters. You see, at the end of the day, what is God wanting to do in Jesus? He's wanting to create in us people who will just love. There's two questions on the final. Did you love God and did you love people? And anybody that's been freed by love can love anybody. Here's what I've learned though. You can't be a lover and a pleaser. That's because applause is always conditional. Always. It's never based on grace. But when you leave the prison of people pleasing, you're free to give unearned, undeserved, unconditional love. That's what the Bible says. We love because He first loved us. No, that's life-changing. You don't have to do anything to get me to love you. I don't have to get anything back from you. It's not a transaction. Because I'm loving you out of the blessing I got, not to get something from you. Let me tell you, you know how important that is as a leader? Especially when the people you're trying to influence, you have no authoritative or positional authority over. Nobody's going to follow me if they think all I need from you is an applause. I can love people because I'm loved, not because I need something from them. This is how Jesus loved people. Think about it. Jesus could love anybody because He didn't care what anybody thought. Jesus, she's a streetwalker. I don't care. Jesus, He collects taxes. I don't care. I don't love people based on what it's going to do for me if I love them. I love people out of the blessing of God. And you know something? You can be that free. You can change how you think. You can start each day deciding it's already been decided. I know I'm liked. God said so. So, fast forward to high school. I grew up in South Dallas, Oak Cliff. Carter Cowboy, anybody? That was me. And for reasons that I can't go into, I was a year behind age-wise in my class. And so that meant at the end of my freshman year, some of my peers were starting to get their driver's license. At the end of my sophomore year, everybody had their driver's license except me. I'm starting my junior year and I don't have a driver's license yet. That does not put you up very high on the cool ladder. Okay? But I wasn't at the bottom of the ladder. In my high school, the kid at the bottom of the ladder was named Daryl. Daryl was socially awkward. He literally had the glasses taped together. He literally had the pocket protector with the pins. And it was never out of bounds to pick on Daryl. He would ride the bus to school and he would just get piled on. Imagine starting every day of school and your self-esteem is beat up before you even walk in the building. See, and there's something that a lot of the kids didn't know that I knew, because Daryl lived just a few houses up the street from me. His father was an alcoholic and an extremely angry man. More than one time I would walk by that house and I would hear his father drunk screaming at Daryl. And sometimes not just screaming. Well, anyway, finally in the fall semester of my junior year, I turned 16. I get a license. I had saved up $600. You could do that back then. And I bought an old crappy Chevy Chevelle. It wasn't much, but it drove and it was mine. And I was going to be able to drive to school. I could not wait. I mean, for one, I am finally going to move up a little bit on the cool ladder because I got a car. And it's right after my birthday. I'm having supper with my family. There's a knock on the door. I open the door. It's Daryl. Rick, is that your car? Yeah, Daryl. I turned 16. I got a car. Are you going to drive it to school tomorrow? Yeah, I'm going to drive to school tomorrow. Can I have a ride? Now, I'm not proud of this, but you know the first thought that went through my head. I have waited so long to finally be a little cooler. And now I'm going to give the most unpopular kid in school a ride? Everyone's going to call me Daryl's buddy? But then I looked in his eyes and I realized Daryl wasn't asking me for a ride. He was asking me for relief. I said, yeah, Daryl, I'll give you a ride. And I did. Every day, the rest of the year. I took my friend Daryl to school. It did not make me more popular. But I still remember that next summer, I'm in my backyard and I hear something belching and chugging up the alley. And it's a beat up old car. And Daryl got out. He said, Rick, I got a car. And I wanted you to be the first person to see it. And I don't know how to explain it. the first time in my life I felt the tangible smile of God. It is so empowering when you can learn to live your life out of your blessing instead of always fishing for a blessing from a fickle crowd. It'll make you a better marriage partner. It'll make you a better father or mother. It'll make you a much better disciple of Jesus. It'll make you a better leader. So, do you hear that? Listen real close. Hear what that is? That's heaven. God is clapping for you today. Learn to listen. It changes everything. So I want to say a prayer, and then I've asked Cole to come up and just sing a song because I love the very simple line. You're a good, good father. That's who you are. And I'm loved by you. That's who I am. So God, thank you for this time with these students. I pray the words I said have blessed them, but even more I pray they have honored you. Thank you for being patient with me and teaching this recovering approval addict where to find my worth. Help me to live in such a way that I can love anybody because you've already given me what I need. Thank you for sending Jesus to die for me when I had nothing to give. Help us to find our identity in Him. We are loved by you. That's who we are. I pray you in Jesus' name.